Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakahakwadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who ruled and teach well, and whom I learned this truth from. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the Brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in Isaiah chapter 55, verse 11. So shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. Every single prophecy stated in the scriptures, or what people refer to as the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament, as well as the Apocrypha, which is a part of the Old Testament, will take place, and nothing will happen to stop biblical prophecy from coming to its fulfillment. And we're living in the last days, really the last seconds of the last days, before the ushering in of the kingdom of heaven under the true children of Israel, who are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today, and the end of this current age of the rulership of the heathen nations, chiefly of the biblical Edomites, who are known as these so-called white people. And if you've got that spiritual eye salve, you can clearly see that all the end time signs and prophecies that we were told to look for in the scriptures are either in the process of taking place or taking place as we speak. And in this video, I'll be profiling a little bit of this video on off-grid desert farming with Paul and Adrian's YouTube channel, just to show that these end-time signs and prophecies are indeed taking place right before our very eyes. And we truly are living in the times before the end of this current age of the rulership of the heathens and the ushering in of the kingdom of heaven. Talks of wars and rumors of wars, World War III, nuclear war, biblical alliances being made, etc., etc. And the title of this video is Urgent Alert, Major False Flag Coming in Ukraine to Blow Up the Dam. Each side is blaming the other. And this is a very good video that I would recommend you sincere Akim and Aqua check out to just get an update on a lot of the current events that are taking place that the mainstream media in the West isn't talking about. And I'm going to start this video at the 40-minute and 51-second mark. And this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes. And what Paul is talking about in this part of the video I'm going to start at is how one of the top diplomats in Russia, Sergei Lavrov, is saying that Russia is putting measures in place to take all their diplomats out of particular Western countries, especially in the United States of America, because they no longer see that the West, especially the U.S., doesn't want to handle this situation in Ukraine or really any situation dealing with Russia diplomatically. So if you can't deal with things diplomatically, what's the next step? Dealing with it by a conflict, war. And again, World War III is a part of biblical prophecy, and Russia and the U.S. are going to be some of the two main combatants in this third woe, as it says in Revelation chapter 9, verse 12. One woe or destruction is past, referring to World War I, and behold, there come two woes more hereafter, World War II, which is past, and World War III, which is quickly coming, and will go nuclear.
There is no point in maintaining the same diplomatic presence in the West. Russia sees no point in maintaining the same diplomatic presence in the West, the country's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, said, announcing that Moscow would now focus on Asia and Africa.
And that's a part of biblical prophecy, Ezekiel chapter 38, which we will get into.
There is no sense and no inclination, of course, to maintain the same presence in Western countries, Lavrov said during a meeting with new graduates recently hired by the Russian Foreign Ministry. Our diplomats are having a hard time. Russian diplomats work there in conditions that can hardly be described as humane. They constantly create problems for them, constantly making threats, the Russian Foreign Ministry even emphasized. But the most important thing is that there is no work there. All economic cooperation with Moscow, he added. What will we do? We cannot force others to love us, said the head of the Russian diplomacy. Asia and Africa is ready to cooperate with Moscow on equal terms. The countries of the third world in Asia as well as Africa, on the contrary, need additional attention, Lavrov noted, clarifying that Russia has many projects there, mainly commercial, which require diplomatic accompaniment. Under these conditions, we will naturally shift the center of gravity to those countries which are ready to work on equal terms and cooperate with us on a mutual beneficial basis. So, folks,
and Russia pivoting towards continents like Africa is all a part of biblical prophecy, because Russia and certain African countries are going to be allied to each other. Hey, it's going to go from simply economic and diplomatic ties to eventually ties and alliances for war. This is Ezekiel chapter 38. I'm going to start at verse 1. The word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, which is the biblical name for Russia. And Russia is also known as the North Country in Jeremiah chapter 50, as well as the Medes in Isaiah chapter 13. The land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. And that's the Most High putting that old confrontational Soviet Union spirit back onto these Russian Edomites, which we can clearly see with their current military operation in Ukraine and them building back up a lot of their political and military ties and assets all across the planet. They're building up their military assets in that Arctic Ocean region, just north of the U.S., which is why Russia is known as the North Country, and that includes nuclear. They opened back up a military port in Syria, which they also helped Bashar al-Assad during the Syrian civil war, when the U.S. and the West used proxy forces like ISIS, mercenary forces, to try to overthrow his government. They're doing new deals with countries like Sudan in Eastern Africa. Hey, they're just, again, building back up their economic and military presence all across the planet. And I will bring thee forth and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company, with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. And the Most High has brought forth the Russians. Look at it, Ukraine. They're in there with a military presence, fighting that Western-backed government of Vladimir Zelensky. But what this is ultimately talking about is the Russian military being gathered down in the Valley of Jehoshaphat in that Middle Eastern region for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon in Joel chapter 3. But here's the main point I wanted to get to in verse 5. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. And we know that Gog, or Russia, is one of the top allies of Persia, which is the ancient name for Iran, but it also mentions Ethiopia and Libya. And where are those two countries located? In the continent of Africa. Again, let's pull this back a little bit. The countries of the Asia and Africa, Ethiopia, Libya, are ready to cooperate with Moscow, Gog, on equal terms. The countries of the third world in Asia as well as in Africa, on the contrary, need additional attention, Lavrov noted, clarifying that Russia has many projects there, mainly commercial, which require diplomatic accompaniment. Hey, Ezekiel chapter 38, beginning to come to pass right before your very eyes. Gomer, which is speaking of Turkey and all his bands. And I've done plenty of videos in the past showing that while Turkey puts up this image to the public that they're allies with the West and they are a part of NATO, ultimately they're going to turn against the West and ally themselves with Gog or Russia during World War III. The house of Togarmah of the North Quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company, all your allies that are assembled unto thee, Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, Gomer, the house of Togarmah of the North Quarters and all his bands, and be thou a guard unto them, be thou a protector unto them. Because as we can see, it's Russia that's being the big brother to a lot of these medium and smaller nations out here that the West comes against. And these are biblical alliances being formed ultimately for that battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon in that Middle Eastern region. Let's get back to this clip.
Beneficial basis. So folks, this is breaking news right now. Red alert, breaking news. This is breaking news, folks. This story I just read you is enough for breaking news, for emergency alert. Just this story alone, that the top diplomat of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, is now saying that there is no more point in having diplomats in Western countries. You really...
I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. Again, the Most High putting that Soviet Union spirit back onto these Russian Edomites. Hey, they see that the West isn't going to play ball and ultimately wants war. Hey, so fuck it. We're going to worry about our interests and build back up, hey, that former Soviet Union.
You really need to think about that, folks, because you don't do that unless...
And remember, during the Cold War, Russia, or the Soviet Union as it was known back then, helped out a lot of third world countries in Africa and Asia to fight against the West when they were having a lot of their proxy wars in those countries to bring them into their sphere of influence and not let them be a part of the sphere of the influence of the Soviet Union. But this ain't going to be a Cold War. This third woe is going to be a hot war, a hot nuclear war.
You know that you're going to war with that country. You don't pull your diplomatic staff out 100% unless you know that there's going to be a world war. There's going to be a major war between those two nations. And that's what he is just stating right now, that there's no point to have diplomats in Europe or in the United States anymore. We're going to war, folks. 100%, 110%. We are going to war with Russia and probably China next.
Yes.
And then North Korea, and then probably Iran is going to attack Israel. That's called a world war, folks. Haven't seen one.
That's it with this clip. But again, one woe is past, speaking of World War I, and behold, there come two woes more hereafter. World War II, which is past, and this third woe, World War III, which is quickly coming. And the U.S. is going to be at war against, of course, Russia, China as well, North Korea, and Iran. And Paul, where I stopped the clip, said Iran's going to attack Israel. And best believe Israel and Iran are going to go to war, but it's going to be the state of Israel that's going to create conditions to kick off that war, which is going to play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. This is Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 20. Therefore, hear the counsel of Yahweh that he had taken against Edom, the biblical Edomites being, again, these so-called white people today in the U.S., Britain, Europe, Russia, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and in the Holy Land. Those people over there aren't the true children of the Most High. They're Amalekite Edomites who appointed the land into their possession as pursuant to Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 5. Hence why there's constant conflict and war over in that region. And World War III hasn't even happened yet. And you can read in Micah chapter 4 that when the true children of Israel are back in the land, these nations would not learn war anymore. And his purposes that he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Speaking of those Amalekite Edomites, surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. These Amalekite Edomites are going to do something. A false flag attack, or a straight out attack, or just some type of situation to provoke a response against Iran so they can be justified in declaring war against them and drawing out nations like the U.S. and these other NATO countries in on the side of the state of Israel, and on the side of Iran or Persia, it's going to draw out nations like Russia or Gog, China, and our other allies to be a guard under her. And while you've got all these different talks of war between China and Taiwan, war between Israel and Iran, escalations of war between Russia and the West during Ukraine, World War III will not truly kick off until, and those nuclear missiles will not fly until the charagma, the MARKOFTHEBEAST, in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 18, which is the RFID/NFC MICROCHIPIMPLANT, is mandatorily implemented. Until then, as it says in Matthew chapter 24, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Hey, things are going to escalate out here. Hey, more wars are going to pop up. You're going to hear more rumors of wars. But as it further says in verse 8, all these are the beginning of sorrows. We're just in the beginning stages right now. World War III won't truly kick off, and those nukes won't truly fly. And that battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat in Joel chapter 3, the War of Armageddon, won't take place until after the charagma in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 18, is mandatorily implemented. But as we can clearly see, with each passing day, we're getting closer and closer to the mandatory implementation of the charagma. In mainstream media outlets, they're literally talking about the CHIP IMPLANT. So hey, as it says in Romans chapter 13, our salvation is nearer than when we believed, Akim and you sincere Akwath. And so now more than ever, we should be doing everything we can to stay in the good graces of our power, Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, so we can have that protective hedge over us during Jacob's trouble and ultimately be saved from the calamities of Jacob's trouble, especially those nuclear missiles. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.